In 2019, the governments of Thailand and Cambodia officially reopened the railway line from Ban Kalong Luk, Thailand, to Poipet, Cambodia. In the late 80s and early 90s, I used to be in this area. The train station in Poipet, Cambodia, was closed in 1974 due to the war. It was a desolate and abandoned place with defensive positions built on both sides. After the Vietnamese volunteer troops expelled the Khmer Rouge, they handed over this area to the new Cambodian government at that time. During that time, I was in the Ampin area, which means Matri in Vietnamese. It was a lake created by the Khmer Rouge government for storing fresh water. Due to severe water scarcity during the dry season in this region, the lake covered an area of over 1 square kilometer, surrounded by several small villages of Cambodian people. It was part of Battambang province back then, but now it's Bante Mayanche. On the Thai side of the border, about a few kilometers away, there were roads 3,346 and 3,308, two parallel roads intersecting in the northwest of the lake before heading deep into the Thai interior. This place was not unfamiliar to former soldiers. It was known for its notorious strategic strongholds of bloodshed, such as Ampin, Poipet, 175, Phumale. The area was covered with dense bamboo forests, countless landmines, and the remains of dead soldiers. As this was the road through the Poipet border crossing, traders and people fleeing the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia often crossed here into Thailand. That was how it used to be, but since the liberation, this place has undergone a tremendous transformation. When we returned there a few years later, we were amazed by the changes. Nowadays, this place is one of the most concentrated areas of casinos in Cambodia, with the district of Aranyaprathet in Sakyo province, Thailand, located on the other side of the border. In the past, I used to hear stories from the local people here and from my fellow comrades about ghostly occurrences in this area. Due to my interest in exploring eerie places and supernatural stories, I was always curious and asked questions in various ways. In this place, I heard many stories of that kind. Let me share a few fragments with everyone for fun. During the war, this area, Poipet, was desolate and empty. There were few people living far from the border checkpoint of the border defense. On the Ampin Lake, there was an abandoned industrial area. Later, the remnants of the Khmer Rouge returned and established a fairly large base there. I can't remember its exact name now, and it no longer bears any traces of the past. Modern houses have been built there, and it looks beautiful. At that time, there were several footpaths through which we could cross into Thailand. One afternoon, two of my comrades told me that they had noticed many hidden figures along the road. Since there were occasional smugglers secretly crossing there, I wasn't particularly surprised. But I found it strange that they dared to travel on those paths during daylight or when it was just getting dark, because they usually crossed at night. One night, under a bright moon, my 5 companions and I returned from the Thai border to this side. We walked about 5 to 7 meters apart, observing our surroundings as we went. When we passed a sunken field and were about to enter a sparse bamboo forest, all of us noticed several vague figures ahead, with the sound of women's voices murmuring. This bamboo forest was flat and rose like a burial mound in the barren area, making it easy to observe and block off. We thought they were remnants of the enemy, so we quickly divided into 2 groups to surround them. Since we had crossed this area many times during the day, we were familiar with the terrain like the back of our hands. Mr. S. swiftly moved to the front, hiding behind a clump of bushes that extended from the bamboo grove into the field. I and another comrade followed, and when we saw the dark figures disappearing into the bushes, we also approached and blocked their retreat. But strangely, as soon as we entered the bushes, they seemed to vanish into thin air and there was no movement or sound. We thought they had sensed our presence and hidden themselves, so we carefully searched every position, but we found nothing. The weather was scorching hot, so we gathered and sat down, whispering to each other about where they had gone. Finally, Mr. N gave the order to withdraw. Mr. S and I were at the back of the group, and strangely enough, when we just came out of the bamboo grove towards the dry canal, in the bright moonlight, I saw them behind me, only about 20 meters away. I could clearly see that the person at the front was a woman. I picked up a clump of dirt and threw it at Mr. S's back, but he had already noticed it. He signaled for me to sit down, and the others also sat down. Under the bright moonlight, a group of 11 of us, we counted carefully, and there were 11. Including 2 children, all of them were women and girls. They were walking behind us, along the same path, but when we sat down and aimed our guns at them, they passed by us, seemingly parallel. They walked silently under the moonlight, and although we had heard them talking earlier, when they passed by us, they were only a few dozen meters away on either side. We sat in silence, gaping at them. while there were many small dried thorny bushes on that side, but when they passed, not a sound came from them, and the insects continued to chirp. This was very strange because when we walked at night in deserted places like this, insects were the warning signal for the presence of people. When humans were present, the insects would suddenly fall silent. But when they passed by, the insects were still chirping. When we met with the Border Defense Forces and some local residents, I heard them tell me that it wasn't just us who had encountered strange incidents. The former soldiers stationed there had also encountered them. They were the people from the nearby villages who had been killed and robbed by the enemy troops several years ago, and they had been lingering in the dense bamboo forest and the deserted area. Later, when we gradually moved to point 175 where the thick bamboo forests were, we came across many human bones below. There were bones of children and women, which I believed were of Vietnamese origin because of their long hair and the white stainless steel hairpins that Vietnamese women used to wear. In contrast, the Cambodian people had their hair cut at the nape of the neck, following the Pol Pot regime's rules. Recently, I stayed at the house of a railway staff member here, and I heard him tell a story. This was the third time I had heard this story, told by 3 people, a comrade and 2 Cambodian individuals. At that Poi Pot station, during the Vietnam War, the 60s and 70s, there was a Vietnamese noble girl, the daughter of a high-ranking official from the previous regime, who came from a wealthy family. Her father had a small mansion right at the border gate, now a hotel with a cafe and a beautiful feng shui water pond below. It's unclear why, but that girl committed suicide at the station in 1971. The train ran over her, crushing her into many pieces. At that time, the place was still bustling, and her suicide caused quite a stir in the local community for a long time. It was said that she took her own life due to a romantic affair. Afterward, many supernatural stories about this girl circulated among the local people here. Above the gate of the station, there is a small iron bridge. Even now, the roof of the shrine, with its curved peak, is where the girl's head was found. At first, they thought it had been crushed by the train, but somehow, it ended up there, more than 100 meters away from the accident site, and fell into the canal below. One afternoon after the accident a few days ago, an old woman was walking across the train station when she suddenly burst into loud and chilling cries and walked as if unconsciously, with her hands reaching out in front like a blind person. Then she headed towards the bridge, crying out for everyone to bring her head up from below. Many people witnessed it, and the police retrieved the girl's head, which was no longer intact, from there. No one could explain why, as there was no connection between the girl and the old woman, who was just a visitor from afar and unaware of the accident. A friend who worked at the nearby station told the story. Since childhood, he had witnessed the ghost of this girl appearing and walking along the railway tracks to the bridge. At that time, the station was closed due to the war, and it was in ruins. The headless girl would sway back and forth on the old railroad tracks, clearly visible under the moonlight during the middle of the night. After the girl's accident, several tragic train accidents occurred at the station over the course of a month. Strangely, they all happened inside the station, not at the intersection of tracks. Those who used to work at the station, most of whom had passed away, recounted that during their night shifts, they often heard the train bell ringing, door slamming, and the girl screaming, forcing them to search for their own bodies and reconnect. Some railroad gatekeepers said that occasionally, when they sat down for tea at night, their teacups would turn bright red and taste like the smell of blood, making it undrinkable. A man who still lived about 2 kilometers from the station shared his story. He used to play football at the station, and one day, a girl kept waving her hand, beckoning him to follow her. He mindlessly followed her, and suddenly, a train rushed by, taking his legs and several fingers, but he didn't die. What was terrifying was that before he passed out, he still saw the girl among the crowd pulling him out. Her eyes were filled with anger, not the smile she had when she beckoned him. He was so terrified that he never dared to go near that station again. The station employee also mentioned that many railway workers were teased by this girl, who would knock on their doors at midnight and walk with them along the railway tracks. The peak of these incidents was when one worker was fatally run over by a train near a small iron bridge, where the girl's head was found in the past. To address the haunting incidents, the responsible individuals at the station invited a spiritual master to perform rituals and calm down the rampage of the girl. Afterward, the accidents decreased compared to before. However, since the reopening of the station in 2019, strange occurrences have been observed more than once. On one occasion, the train driver saw a girl standing in the middle of the tracks not far from the bridge. The train blew its horn and applied the brakes, but when they checked, there was nothing there. The most recent incident happened 2 months ago when the waiting room staff experienced a terrifying event. At 9 p.m., while they were cleaning up before leaving, they suddenly smelled a strong and pungent odor. Upon investigating, they found a person lying on bench B, initially thinking it was a sleeping train passenger. When 2 staff members approached to wake the person up, they both screamed in horror and ran out in fear, almost going mad. On the seat was just a mutilated corpse. When people rushed in, there was nothing there, only a lingering, faint smell in the room. Right outside this room is the veranda where the girl's suicide body used to be collected and placed.